Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on data transformation with Microsoft Power Query, delivered to you by OCL Learning. We have decided to take a step back and do this webinar once again because there are some fundamental tools that we would want to look at in Microsoft Power Query, so that as we move forward with the Power series, we can be able to understand the beginning of ETL all the way to modeling and visualizations of data. So among some of the capabilities that we have at OCL, we have Microsoft applications. These range from Excel, Power BI, Advanced Word, Advanced PowerPoint. We have business intelligence softwares, where we deal with Tableau. We have Welcome Solo. So among the business intelligence software that we deal with, together with visualization, we combine training on Power BI and Tableau to be able to unlock the power of these BI softwares to give you business trends. We also have programming with VBA, automation with Power Automate for those using the 365 license, and we also have Microsoft Business Central. So welcome to this session. I hope you will gather as much as possible. I would like to take this opportunity to invite David to take us through. Welcome, David.
Excel class, so we start by first sharing Excel. So my name is David Kandia. I'm an Excel expert. I'll take you through this lesson. We said 9 to 11, but I see from the content we'll finish this at least by 10:30. You will drop your questions,
David?
on the yes.
Oh, it's fine. Just go on.
You'll drop your questions on the comments area or on the inbox so that we can answer them as we move along. So for those new in Power Query is an ETL tool, that is extract, transform, load, where you extract your data either inside Excel or you get your data from other sources, say Oracle, from SQL databases, from text files, from many places, then get to Excel, transform it, or what we commonly refer to as shaping your data. So the data that I have here is sales data of 10,578 rows. Each row represents an invoice. So this data set is also sales to 4 East African countries, that is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. There is a sales column at the last column O, and we have the transaction date, which starts from as late as today, as today's invoice, you can see 16th March 2024, all the way back to January 1, 2020. So we'll be using this data to learn. At the end of the lesson, or at the end of this webinar, you should be able to extract data from Excel, from other sources, and transform it and prepare reports. Now, to get us started, I'll take you right into the data tab and then go to Power Query environment. To get to Power Query, previously in Excel 2013, 2010, and earlier versions, Power Query was an add-in that came here just like Power Pivot. Now, if you attended our Power Pivot webinar last month, you must have appreciated what Power Pivot can do, and combined with Power Query can also be very powerful. So when you go to data, here under get and transform data, you'll see get data like that, and you can get data from a file, from an Excel workbook, from text, XML, JSON, PDF, from a folder. If you have like common files inside a folder and you want to pull it to Excel, you can get it from a database, that is from SQL Server, Access Database, Analysis Services, Those of you who know Business Central might have heard of analysis services, SQL Server Analysis Services, Oracle, IBM DB2, MySQL, that is open source SQL, PostgreSQL for those using Oracle, Sybase, Teradata, and SAP HANA database. You can also get it from Azure. Azure is is now Microsoft Cloud, Azure SQL database, all the way down. You can get it from the Power Platform. Alfred mentioned about Power Automate, or getting it from Power BI, Data Flows, or Dataverse. This webinar will dealt so much about getting data from other sources, especially from a table range, but you can also get data from MySQL query all the way down. You can also go to blank query and pull your data from there. You can combine queries. If you have more than one query, you can merge or append, and this class will focus also on that, how to merge queries. You can see from my dataset here, I have the data, the main dataset, I have country code, and I have country manager. So where we have the country and the this should be the country manager. Let me change this, country manager, like that. So to get us started, we'll pull this data to Excel. So we get data from other sources, then we put it on table or range. Once you use Power Query or your Excel is set up well, you'll see that you can also get data right from here, from table or range, so that you don't have to go all the way from get data from other sources and then table or range. So it depends on the approach that you're going to use. So for me, I'm going to go to other sources and get data from table or range. That will load the dialog box that will ask me where my data source is coming from and whether I have headers on my data set. So you can see here, it asks me to create table. So where is my data coming from? It's from cell A1 to 010,579. That is the last row, and my data has headers. This is very important because it will use the headers to read your data. Then click OK. When you do that, it's going to load the Power Query environment, and you can see the Power Query environment there. There you go. So it loads Power Query editor, where you can see here, this is the name of the query, table 1, and that is shown here. So if I want to name my query, I'll call this, let's say, my first query, or just let me call it my dataset, like that. Now, once you get that, you'll see the formula bar, just like Excel, where Power Query loads what we call the M language. This is the M language, but you don't need to know this because all these steps are shown here on the applied steps. The Power Query environment also has the Home tab where you can close and load back your data to Excel. You can refresh your views like that. You can transform your data. So you can group your data, use your data as fast rows like that. You can add a column. And see, if you want to add columns to your data, you can view your queries and even see the query dependencies and the query editor. So in this area here on the left side, you'll see all the queries that you add to your Power Query, while this is your data area. So for example, you can see the transaction date here has been formatted as long date. If I want to format it back to the normal date, I'll go to transform and then show this as just a date, a normal date, or go to the Home tab and change this as date and time, like this, because it's showing us as a date and time. I can show this as date. So transformation can either happen on the Home tab or under the Transform tab. So when I click the date, it will ask me whether I want to replace the current step or add a new step. That is, what it has done here is it has changed the type. So I want to replace the current so that I don't have to have a new step. As an analyst, the first thing I do when I get date data is to pull the date, the year, the month, and the month ID, that is 1 to 12. So for this case, I know my data, or you might even not know that the data is from January 2020 to current date. So what I'll do is pick transaction date, then add column. From there, I'll add column, then date, then year, then I add the year. So that way, please mute if you are joining, or Alfred can help me to mute everyone.
Yes, let me mute.
That's the first one. The second step is transaction date. I add date, then month, then name of month. So it will give me the name of month, which is January to December. You can see that at the last column here. I also add the month ID, which is 1 to 12. And we'll see later how you can use the month ID for certain purposes. Other things that you can add from the date is you can add the end of year, start of year, month, start of month, and end of month. You can add the quarters, the week, and the day. So for the day, I can add the day so that it gives me 1 to 30. So once I'm done, if I want to load back my Excel, back my days to Excel, I go back home and then close and load. So this will take my data back, and it will create a new sheet that is called my data set, the way I had named before. And you can see this. So we can first preview that and see that it has loaded 10,578 rows. So my data comes there, and you can see at the last column here that I have the month, the year, and that. If you are creating quick reports and you want a summary of the year, the month, and total sales, I can insert a pivot table like that. Then click OK. And now I use the new columns that I created in my dataset so that I create my new report. For this case, I'll come down here and say, give me a report for summarized by year, by month, and then amount. And you can see it gives me that. I can put the year here above the rows so that I have the year, the month, and the amount. I can also go to design, then change the report layout to tabular format. So I get this. Of course, this is not aligned or sorted from January to December, but that will come later or in another session. Customary, we would have to show the most or the recent year at the top. So data, and I sort in descending order so that you can see here, I have 3 months because this is data up to today, then last year, and then 2022 all the way down to 2021. For the sake of those who have not experienced pivot tables, you can also have the year on the columns so that you have this report on the month, the year at the top, and then the values shows you at the middle here on the data environments. So we continue with Power Query. So my data set comes here. That is the first transformation that we've done to the data. You can also transform this data by renaming. For example, we've seen that we have Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. Say I want to cluster these countries into, I want to put these countries into clusters. I want to put Tanzania and Kenya in cluster 1, and then Uganda and Rwanda in cluster 2. Customarily, we'd use if functions, but when you use Power Query, it means you replace if functions. So I'll go back to my query, and there are 2 ways of going back to my Power Query. Either double click on queries and connections. If you don't see this, say you'd close that, you'd get your queries here on data, then queries and connections. So I see my queries, you either double click that, or on the quick menu at the top here, when you select the data, you'll see query, and then you can edit query. You can also check on the properties of the query, delete a current query, refresh should you add new data sets or delete current rows. You can load your query either as a sheet or a connection or a pivot table or only a table. You can also go to properties and check the refresh rate for your data. For example, you can say, I want my reports to be refreshable by default 60 minutes, or you can change this by up to a maximum of 240. That is about 4 hours. You can refresh the data while opening the file and remove data from external range before saving the workbook. That is, if you reduce or increase the number of rows for your data sets. You can also put your query name and the description there. And then I cancel that. Cancel that. Here I mentioned about merging your data. You have 2 data sets, for example, this data set with how many columns? My data set here has 19 columns. If I want to bring in more columns from a related data set, you do the merge. If I have 100 rows here and I want to add 200 rows from another data set, I'm going to use the append query, and that is something that we're going to do shortly. For now, I'm going to go back to my query by double-clicking here to go back to Power Query. So I'm back to Power Query. So before I do the clustering of countries, I want to mention that you can always duplicate your query. If you don't want to mess with the original query, you can either duplicate or reference your query. The difference between duplicating and referencing a query is such that if I duplicate this query like that, I have my new query here. I can call this country analysis, for example. Whatever I do in the country analysis is not related to my data sets. But should I reference this? For example, I right-click and reference my query. It means this reference here will be dependent on my dataset. If should I change or remove columns in my dataset, it's going to affect my query. And you can see here my dataset that I've referenced, my dataset 2 that I've referenced my dataset here is only showing you the source, while the country analysis is showing you the steps exactly as it appears on my datasets. So I'm going to use the country analysis to do the clustering. I mentioned that you needed an if function, if or ifs, or VLOOKUP, or sometimes we would use XMatch for you to do clustering in Excel. But when in Power Query, you'll need what we call conditional column. So I'll say if it's Uganda or Kenya, I'm going to introduce a column called cluster 1, while Uganda and Rwanda would be cluster 2. So without selecting that, I'll go to add column, then add conditional column. I wait for that to load. Again, as I mentioned, you can drop a question, either comment or put it on the inbox. So while there, we got a conditional column. I'm going to call this cluster. Then on the column name, I'm going to pick country. So the country, if the country is equal to Kenya, but if you're also dealing with numbers, you can still use does not equal to, begins with, does not begin with, ends with, does not end with, contain, or does not contain. Very common operators in Excel. So for this case, we'll say if the country is equals to Kenya, then I'm going to call this cluster 1. Then I add a clause like that. Say if the country is equal to Tanzania, then I'll call this cluster 2. Now I have the option of typing all the way for Uganda and Rwanda, but I have here what we call the else clause. So I'll say if the country is Kenya and Tanzania is this is cluster 1, Kenya and Tanzania is cluster 1, and say anything else becomes cluster 2. So I'll put this as cluster 2. But you have the option of also adding and saying if the country is equals to Uganda, it becomes cluster 2. If the country is Rwanda, becomes cluster 2. But for this case, I've said anything else that is North Kenya and Tanzania, becomes cluster 2. Then I click OK. So I'll get that, and it gives me cluster 1 and cluster 2. When you load this to Excel, you can close and load like that, and it takes you back to Excel, and you'll see a new column for the country analysis. You see my data set here. My data set here doesn't have the cluster, but I've added that in the country analysis. And again, this you can put that in the same sheet. Now I can insert that and put it into clusters. I go back to my Power Query. You can click on any query to take you back to Power Query. So that is what we call a conditional column when you use Power Query. So we have the conditional column here. This is on my country analysis. Other conditional columns that you can create is based also on data. For example, if I want to pull only, say a specific data set for 2021. So what I'll do is add a column like this. No, that I'm going to deal with it on when dealing with filters. Let me just focus on columns. So, for example, if say this amount here is only the gross amount and I want the net amount. If I want to create net amount from my sales, I can create a conditional column or a custom column that says this amount times 70%, so that let's say put the net amount at 70%. So I'll create a custom column. Remember, I'm on the add column, so it's going to add a new column for my data. Then I multiply the amount. So I'll put this as net sales. And then the net sales will be the amount here times 0.7, or you can write 20%. That way, it's going to reduce the amount by 30% and click OK. So it gives me the net sales there. Even if I wanted to calculate the profit, I'll simply just subtract the gross sales minus net sales, which is still a custom amount. So it goes there and calculate the net sales. Say this is a profit, and the profit will be amount minus, so this is amount minus net sales, like that. Then click OK for you to get the profit on the last column. So these are calculations that you do in Power Query and return your data back to Excel. Every time I do that, there is the applied steps that come here. For a seasoned analyst, will always rename this. For example, I know if the first net added column here was to create net sales. So I right click here and rename this and call this net sales. This is just the step. This is for profit. I'm going to rename this and call this profit. So that way, when you share your Excel workbooks with other people, they're able to follow this through for the steps that you're going to create. On the referencing, so when I mentioned that this was the duplicate, when I reference my data like this, let me just call it reference data for the purpose of clarity, like that. So suppose I remove, come here to the data set, and if anything that you change here is going to change on this. I'm going to show that when I'll be doing clustering, when I'll be doing lookups in Excel. So you can see this, the reference data will show you that it's coming from my data set. I hope people are following. We'll give some 2 minutes later for people to quickly ask questions, but we'll only restrict to 2 people so that we can move. Or Alfred, do you think that we can take it as early as this? Feel free to ask questions. We still have time. Alfred?
Yeah, if there's a question, we can take a question. Otherwise, we proceed. I think we can proceed with the webinar, then we take questions on chat.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take back my data to close and load and take it there. Now, let me remind you that I had some other sheets in this workbook. I have the country code and the country manager, like this. So sometimes if I wanted, say, for example, to bring in, I want to do an analysis of sales by country manager. In my original data set here, I don't have the word country manager, you see? So it means I have to look up for the country manager using the country. So to do that, we first pull the country manager data to our Excel. So I'm going to go to data, then get data from table or range, and then click OK. So I get these two. See, now it comes as table 5. And this has the country and the country manager. I need to rename this and call this country manager. It's always good to rename your query so that it's clear. Now I want to bring in the country manager to country analysis. So to do that, we do what we call the appending. So two ways. You can either append while here. I'm sorry, I'm going to merge this because I'm bringing new columns to the main dataset. I'm going to use the merge queries tool. You can either merge current query or merge it as new, so you get a new query down here that contains the country manager. Now, why I say there are two ways, when you pull this data back to Excel, you see on the query menu, just wait for it to load. So it's coming here. Then on the query, you can also merge from here. So you don't have to go back to the Power Query environment. But still, when you click merge, it's going to take you back to Power Query. So merge that. But doesn't give you the option of merging is new. So I'm going to cancel this so that I bring in a new sheet. So I'm going to go back to my dataset, go to country analysis, which is down here. Wait for Power Query to load my datasets. So on country analysis, I'm going to merge this query as new. So click merge, then merge query as new. Depending on where you want to take the columns to. For example, I want to bring in to this dataset the columns from my country manager data. So I'll select my country manager data, which is this, and you see now the importance of renaming your queries so that whenever you select, you know you're selecting the correct one. So I'm going to use the column called country, which is this, and merge use to look up with the country column here. So that, but what in my interest, I just want to bring in the country manager. Then I click OK. When you click OK, you now see merge one, which is my new merge data. And then take this, you can see at the last column here, the table containing country manager comes here. So I'm going to expand this like that, and you'll see that, but I'm not interested in the country. So I'll uncheck the country because already I have the country column here and click OK. So it brings me that. For those who doubt, you can still bring in the two columns and later delete it after you are done with the query. So I can bring in the country and come there and you can see the table. So for every entry that contains Uganda, it will bring in the Uganda one and the sales manager for Uganda. So after that, you can delete this and say, I want to remove this column. So I remain with only the country manager for from that database. I can rename this and call this country analysis 2. The good thing is you can have as many sheets, as many queries as possible without affecting how your Excel runs, because Power Query only gives you or shows you a preview of your dataset, such that it doesn't create, doesn't make Excel run slow. So I have there my country analysis 2, and then I have it there. Now it means that whenever I insert my report like that, I'm going to get a report now that has the country manager and the sales. Now I bring in and use the country manager, and then I can even have now the gross amount, the net sales, and the profit, and it gives me like that. But ordinarily, in my initial data set, I didn't have the country manager like that. So it makes analysis better, and you can run better reports. The next one that we are going to look at is bring in the country code. So I want to bring in the country code, but the reason why I add this is, should you not have, for example, I'm going to use my original data set like that. So suppose you didn't have the country column. So let me just back here. At least this is, so I'm going to delete this. So come here and delete the country. So remove this column like that. I'm going to remove the city like that. So suppose you can't work on this. So suppose in my data that I had originally, let me just explain this. The purpose that I brought this country code is sometimes on this. Sometimes our data only comes with the country code, and you need to insert the country name. That is now what we use the match for. So what I'll do is, if I add this in my data set, because looks like this, when I was importing, I didn't import the country code because I wanted to bring in the country code and use the match tool to bring in the country name, but not an issue. You've learned it using the sales manager example. Going back to my Power Query. So you look at here, actually reminding me of the country code. When you look at the order ID, we have 329 UG 2024. 329 is the invoice number, UG is the country code, and 2024 is the year. So suppose I wanted to pull the invoice number, which is 329, and have this in my dataset as the invoice number separately, the country code, and the year, because this 2024 picks from the year there. So to do that, we use the split column. So you've seen you can remove columns. Now let's see how you can split columns. So you can split a column either by delimiter, by number of characters, by position, lowercase to uppercase, by uppercase to lowercase, from digit to non-digit, or non-digit to digit. So for this case, I want to split by number of characters. So when I click by number of characters, you'll see that I want first to get the invoice number. So I want the first 3 characters once as left as possible. So it means the invoice number, which is on the left side, click like that, then click OK. So that way it splits this into 2. If I don't want to mess up with the original order ID, then I use the add column feature here, so that I know I'll keep the original order ID and introduce the invoice number. So I'm going to undo the split by column. So I have the original one, then add column, and then for this I use extract. So I can say extract first characters. When I click first characters, it will ask me how many number of characters that I want to extract. I want the first 3 characters, and click OK. So you've seen the split, and this just works fine. And then it extracts for me the first characters, but I don't want this to show up here. So I'm going to take this to the first column. Right click on this, then move it to the beginning. So it takes my order ID, the beginning, rename this, and I'm going to call this the invoice number. Like that. So the next one is I can extract between delimiters if I want the country code. So extract between delimiters. And those of you who have used Excel before, I mean, if you are familiar with Excel left, right, and mid functions, this is what exactly Power Query is trying to do. So I want at the start of the delimiter, so the start of the delimiter is, so I want the fourth character. That is not, that's when I have delimiters. Alfred, let me, so I want a range.
Get a range.
So this, yes, I'm using a range, yes. Start
From
range
0?
is from, I want from 4, is it?
Oh, 1, 2.
The
You want to
fourth
get
character.
UG, yeah?
I want to get UG, so I'm starting from, the starting
From
index
3.
is 4.
Put 3.
3 would be that, so let's try. And then I want to start 2. You can always make mistakes and introduce like that, yes. So it is from 3. So it's from 3, like that, then okay. So it gives me the country code. So I'm going to name this and call this country code. Now I'm going to now go back to my early example where we didn't have the country code, where we didn't have the country. So suppose I don't have the country, remove this country. I'm going to remove columns and then I've removed the city and remove the columns. So suppose my original data set was like this. For learning purposes, so I take it back to there, and then let me wait for it to refresh. Yeah, so now I have my country code at the last column. I have the country code which is there, and I have the invoice number. Now, using my country data that I had country code here, and I want to introduce the country using the country code. I'll take this data to Power Query, click on data, then get data from table range and click OK. Once there, I'm going to rename this and call my query country code. So come there and call this country code. Now, if you forgot or did not follow how we were using the early merge, I can merge now. I can use merge this query, my data set here that doesn't have country, and I want to bring in the country because of the country code. I can merge queries. Realize that I don't want to merge this new. I want to merge the current query so that I introduce the country. So I'll come here, then say my data set, I merge it with country code. And then I'm using the country code plus the country code in this data set there, and click OK. Like repeating the same example, and you see the country code table has come here, and then I'll expand this. Expand it. Now you're aware that you can uncheck and only have the country loaded in your data sets. Then click OK. So once you have the country there, you can even drag this manually and take it to the position that you want. So it doesn't have to stay there. You can put that or use the early example that I said move to the beginning, or move left, or move right. So for this case, since I don't want to move to the left, I can drag it manually and put it back to where it belongs. For example, it was just after, I think it was after the, was afterwards. It was after the segment. So I can put it, move it to beginning, then drag it slowly to where I want. So it was after that, and then drag it. Not that it affects in analysis, but sometimes you just want to see the country and see the customer name and the rest only for visual analysis, but not for real data analysis. Now you have back the country code there. I can rename this and call this the country code. Then now you can see also the country code, the country name. Let's call it the country like this. I can see my data has done that. Okay, We are done with that. So we continue. So after you've done your merging, now it's time to group your data. For example, if I wanted to get quick analysis instead of pulling this to Power Pivot, and I wanted to know how much did I sell by country. So I have the country name. The country name is, so you have the country name and you have the amount. Suppose you want to group your data or even by ship mode. Let's use the ship mode. So we have 3 or 4 shipping categories: second class, standard class, same day, and first class. Suppose I want to get the total amount by ship mode. So instead of relying on pivot tables, you can group your data. So for this case, I want to transform my data and group. So I click group. Sorry, so I need to be at the last column here so that it knows that I'm grouping it at the end of my transformation. Because if you group it here, it means you're inserting a new step which is going to mess up with your which is going to mess your query. So for this case, I'm going to group my data so by ship mode and the amount. So I transform, click group by, and I'm going to do a basic group. So it brought me ship mode because already I had selected this. If I didn't select anywhere, for example, I'm there and I group, it will allow you to select the column that you want. For this case, it has brought transaction dates being the first column, but I want to use the ship mode. Group my data by ship mode, and the new column that I want is called total sales, like this. And then what I want to do is sum. When you do the summation, average, median, all that, it will automatically load for you the invoice to choose, which must be a numbers-based column. So I pick that and pick the amount. You can see there is basic grouping, then click OK. So it groups my data and gives me total sales by category. If I wanted to do a more complex one, then I'm going to undo this and then just duplicate my query so that we call it sales analysis. And you know, every time you load this data to your Excel, it's going to create a new sheet. So I'm going to group this. This is what I'm going to group. So transform my data, then group by. Let's group by and use the advanced one. For this case, I'm going to do more than one column and add more aggregations here. So I'm going to say what we're going to do is group my data by country. Then I add the grouping and put it as ship mode. Then on the ship mode, I want number of transactions or number of invoices. Let me just call it number of transactions. So number of invoices, like this. Then I say count the rows. Count the rows by country and ship mode, and add another aggregation for this now is total sales. So put here total sales. Let me bring that like that. Then count instead, it should be sum. Then I'm going to sum the column called amount. Realize that when I count rows, it doesn't give me a column because it's a text field. So for this case, you can also do count distinct, all rows, maximum, minimum, median, average, or sum. For this case, you're going to count rows like that. Then click OK. Since the invoices could be the same, we could have one invoice for many orders. It's not important for me to choose the count distinct rows. Instead, I'm going to count rows. Then click OK. So if I wanted to sum the number of transactions, so you can see here, it's Uganda second class, is 500 invoices, and then total sales. If I don't want to use the count and I want to actually sum the number of invoices, then a good analyst will always introduce what we call the index column. So before that, I'm going to load this back to Excel, then we explore what we call the index column. So you can see now it has grouped my data, says Uganda, second class of that. And you can see if I do this by total sales, you can sort this data in descending order. So I get it by total sales, and you can see how our sales do that. So if you want to do a good analysis, of course, I'm going to do total sales divided by the invoice, so that I see what is the value per invoice. If you want to see what we call the customer value or value per customer, I'll go back to sales analysis, and then we explore more grouping, but this time around we use what we call the index column. Typically, our data doesn't have a way of counting the number. Unless you group them, you can't count the number of rows. If you want to sum the number of rows, then the index column is going to come in handy. So I'm going to go back to my data set and introduce the index column. Yes, you have the invoice number, but if you want to say count the number of transactions per day, unless you group them by day, the best method is to introduce an index column. So I go to add column, then add the index column here. So the index column can number your data 1 to 3 to 10,000 quickly, for example, by either starting from 0 or 1. So if I click from 1, it will introduce a column that numbers my data all the way from 1 to 10,000. You can see that goes all the way to the number of rows that are there in my data, but it will only show us only a preview of 1,000 rows. Contrary to that, you can use the index column now to enter the value 1 all the way down from 1,000 to 10,578. So go to index column, then go to custom column. On the custom column, we'll use the start index as 1, but the increment becomes 0. That way, it adds 1 all through. And you can see, let me just take you back from what we mentioned earlier. Anything I'm going to do here on the dataset will affect the reference data. And you can see it shows you there's an error, but it's not really an error, but shows you there is some analysis that is ongoing here and also affecting the reference data. So I'm going to click OK, and you can see what happens to my dataset. You can see now the index column here shows me all the way one to the last row. Now, should I want to group this data in this? Should I want to group this? I can duplicate this. So I group my new dataset there, but group it and use the index column. But the index column will be a sum. Let's see how. For example, I want to get the number of transactions per day. So what I'll do, you can see here, I have the count, the year, month, and the month there. So if I want to say to get the number of transactions per month, so I'll do a group of month, then use the index column to sum the number of transactions that month. So I'm going to go transform, then group by. I'll come there, advanced. Then this will be, I want the year. It's always good to pick the year because you know this data is from 2020 to 2024. Add another group, and this group now becomes the month name. So month name is there. Drag these up if you are not seeing all the rows. Then the aggregation here will be number of transactions. Transactions like that. And then what I'm going to do is sum. And what I'm going to sum is sum the index column, which is remember we had 2 index columns. The first one was 1, 2, 3 was numerical increment to the last row, while the custom second index was the 1, 1, 1, 1. So that is the aggregation. So there's a number of transactions. Then I do sales per month. So this is total sales. Then this will be now the sum of sales. So I'm going to pick the amount there, then click OK. So see the type of transformation that I've done. So it will tell me in 2024 March, we had 123 transactions and the total sales format is that. So if we are doing some sales analysis and you want to see whether there are spikes or there are low seasons when your sales are low, then this number of transactions will tell us. So now I go back and close and load. If you want to do a custom column from there, I can do it right from here, which is adding a column, and it will be a custom column. The custom column is total sales divided by number of transactions. So value per day is sales, total sales, divided by number of transactions. Then I click OK. So you can see here, it gives me the total value per day. So this is like in every day that I sold, you can see my sales are between 4,900, can't go, so between 4,500 and 5,500. So it means my sales actually they are consistent across the years. Again, the sales data that's been generated, so you might not see any real world patterns, but it tells us the story. So it gives us like that. Now you can see there, and you can see the average. You can also create the averages. The average is 5,014. You can see down here on the previews. We are at the top of the hour, so we're going to take a 2-minute break. Use that break, take some water or break out, but we'll be back at exactly 10 a.m.
For those who have questions, you can proceed to ask the questions either on chat or you can unmute.
Hello, my name is Mohammed.
Yes,
I was
Mohammed.
asking, it's like I'm way back behind. I was inquiring if there is a makeup for this or the webinar before. Sorry.
Yeah, we will share the recording for this webinar. And also now to get all the skills, David will share about the schedule for the next class, which is an advanced Excel class that covers the entire process from ETL to data modeling to data presentation. So for this class, we're going to share a recording, and it will also be in our channel on YouTube. Currently, it is live there. So we'll upload the recording there for you to be able to go back and check on it. And also we'll have our usual advanced Excel class. So I think we can be able to deal with that then, Mohammed. That's
Thank
fine?
you. Well, thank you. That's well captured. What's the YouTube channel?
Let me just share the link right away. Homeboy, you can unmute. Let me know what the struggle is all about in terms of margin.
Oh, hi, I think I may have missed out on a step or two
Yes.
on how to merge, especially the one we've just done for the country and the country code. But since I've heard that you're going to share the recording, I'll just go
Yes.
back and just review that part.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm okay. I'm okay currently. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Let me share the link
Thank you.
to the let me share the link YouTube channel. You'll find also so many recordings there of previous sessions.
Okay, I'm back. Now we learned that you can merge multiple columns in Power Query. We want to see how you can append. Now to append, I'm going to prepare my data differently. So just a minute. To have some specific data. I'm going to prepare 2 or 3 sheets that contain data from different countries. So I'm picking up Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Let's have only 3 so that we can run fast and see how you can. So this is whatever you see here. This is Kenya data. Then I'm going to filter out, then pick Tanzania, then copy Tanzania, and put in a new sheet. Yeah. No, it's that slow. That's Tanzania. I go back and then pick Uganda. So pick Uganda like that. Copy Uganda and put it in a new sheet. Yeah. So we are going to learn 2 things here: appending and consolidating at the same time. So let's see first how to append. Now to append means we have which will let me just rename this so that it's clear. So we have this Uganda, this is Tanzania, and then this is Kenya. Okay, now in Kenya, I have oops, my data has come without columns, without rows, so I'm going to do that manually. This. It was a table, that is why it did not come like that. So the table, that's why it came this way. So that copied cells, and then here, need to go back again and copy and come back here. Okay. Now, when you look at Tanzania, Uganda, I have 2305 rows. Then Tanzania, I have 3143 rows, and Kenya, I have 4420 rows. Now, once I have that, I want us to learn how to do the merging or how to do the appending in Excel. So data. So I'm going to get all my data to Excel. So I get first Kenya. And okay. And there's a quicker way which we'll learn at the tail end called Excel to Power Query that quickly does that consolidation. But let's start with this appending. So for this case, I'm going to name this Kenya. Yeah, like that. We'll close and load. So that you can close and load it. You can load as a connection, but it's fine. I'm going to create a new sheet all the time. And data, get data, pull that Tanzania. With Tanzania. Now for this case, instead, when every time I close and load, it's going to create a new sheet. Instead here, I'm just called close and load and create a connection to it. So I'm going to create only a connection, then click OK. You can see Tanzania has come there, then Uganda, then the data to Power Query, and Do that. There's Uganda. Then we only post and load. So we're creating a connection so that we don't have to load this data to Excel sheets. So I'll have that, and you can see Uganda shortly showed up here. So I create a connection to it and then click OK. So now we have Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. Each has different rows. Each has different number of rows. Now it's time for us to append. So I'm going to go to the query. You can go back to Power Query and use the append tool. So I have that there. So now for this, I'm going to append it as new. When you append queries only, it means you are loading other data sets to the existing or to the active query, and not the query that you selected. So I'm going to add, then append queries as new. I'm going to use, because it's more than 3 tables, I'm going to use this. Then already Kenya is there. So I'm going to take, add Tanzania, and then add Uganda like that. And simply click OK. It's as simple as that. And it appends your data. So it means you've combined your data all the way. And you can see from the end here, it will give you, you can see here, you have Kenya. You see that, you can see, you can do that and see, you load more, you see Kenya, where is Tanzania? Yes, let me see the source, just to confirm that the data is coming. Yeah, so it is Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. So it's okay. It's only that the preview is not showing, and you can see table.combine Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. Then I close and load. See my new appended data from the 3 countries. Wait for my end to load. You can see I appended rows. As Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, can tell, unless my data set here, this is Kenya, this is Tanzania, and this is Uganda. And what else happened there? But fine. So let's so there's appending. If there's a technical problem, but that is how to append. Let's see the normal the second method of consolidating this data. So once you have your data formatted as a table, of course, if you pull your data from Power Query to from Excel to Power Query, it automatically converts it into a table. Now, when you go to table design, you'll see table 1. Then this Tanzania here, I think that is the reason. There's a reason why it did not import. You can see this. It didn't import this because it was not in tabular format. So it didn't import that. That is the reason. So I'm going to format this as table, like that. Then this table 5, I'm going to rename this as Kenya. Then Kenya already exists. So Kenya, I can put an underscore. Then Tanzania, or this Tanzania, so that it does not clash with my queries that are here. Then Uganda. So I'm just pulling the data that I want. Uganda, put an underscore to make them unique. Now that I have Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, if you want to append, let's repeat the append so that so I can delete this. So we are sure about the appending. So I'm wondering what was the reason. So first I need to first delete the append because it's dependent on this for me to delete the other queries. Delete that. One, delete Uganda. So we repeat the append, and then we do now the consolidation after that. Delete that. Okay. Okay, so I can do the append. So first, go to data, table range. But this time around, we are not going to load them as sheets. Instead, we load them as connections only. So come there is Kenya. Then I'm going to load that is connection. So you can see Kenya comes there. It's just a connection. I'm waiting for the dialog for create connection. There, create connection, and okay, the connection comes there. In Tanzania, get data. So the other one did not create because it didn't have. So that is Tanzania, correct? So this Tanzania, then close and load as connection. Then finally we bring in Uganda. So the good thing about connections is you're not really loading the datasets, but you're creating connections, but you can still reuse that data in your query or in Power Pivots, in Power Pivot tables. Here Tanzania, then finally I create Uganda, get data from the table range. Then I have Uganda coming there. Now, once I'm done, I can now append as new queries. 3 or more tables. So I have add Uganda, then add Kenya. I think this Kenya is the original one, not the one that I was supposed to use. Then you close and load. That's combined. Now it's correct. Now it is good. I have the 3 countries. When I load more, I see, oops, Tanzania is becoming problematic, but not an issue. Then close and load. So some of this has to do with data prep. When you prep your data, remember when I brought in the headers manually, that is why you have Uganda having an issue, because what Power Query does is it uses the headers to combine. Now, if you have a snip of Tanzania, and why it doesn't is, if you look at this, let's see, it has something to do. Let me see table 5, what it is. Table 5. So if you select table 5, you see it only selects the dataset without the headers. And that is why when we do the appending, it does not pick. So I'm going to bring in Tanzania fresh so that we can see the example of when you want to do the consolidation using Power Query. So I'm coming back here, then select Tanzania. Okay. And just convert this to range. So data, filter this, and I filter Tanzania. I'm going to pick Tanzania there and put it here as my name. data source like that. Let it load. Okay, so I have Tanzania. My data set like that. So this is Tanzania. While there, I now format this as table. I didn't have it initially, and let me just call this TZ. So we want to combine TZ. So we are not going to repeat the appending example. Instead, we are going to explore another route called excel.current workbook. So if you want to consolidate multiple sheets or multiple workbooks, we saw that you can pull data from a folder. For example, file, you can get data from a folder. But the rule is the data that is in that folder that needs to be combined must be exactly the same number of columns, or typically must be the same headers. So make sure that your headers are consistent at the top for you to do the consolidation. Now to consolidate, go to data, get data, then file. If it's in a folder, pick the folder. But for our case, our data is in this workbook. So I'll go to file, then from other sources, then blank query. You get a blank query, and you know the others has been pre-built queries that we pull, but for this case, now we have to type our own formula to pull these data sets. And I see Tanzania as an error there. If there's an error, then we'll only deal with Kenya and Uganda. So is equals to Excel dot current workbook. Now in Office 365 and Excel 2019, when you type Excel or type just E like that, it loads like formulas, the way formulas load automatically. But in all the versions, Excel 2010, 2007, even 2013, you won't have it loading like this. Even some patches of 2016, but you can always test from your Excel version whether it's like that. If you don't have it loading like this, then you have to type it manually. Now, when you type it manually, it gives you Excel, that is capital E, capital C, and capital W. If you don't do that, your query is not going to load. Then you close and load to qualify that formula, then press enter. When you press enter, you'll now see append 1, all the tables on your workbook, append 1, Kenya underscore append 1, TZ, all that. So for this case, I just want to pick the columns that I need. I just need the tables that I'll pick the tables I need. So for this case, I'll pick Kenya. Let me use the Kenya underscore, TZ, and Uganda underscore. So only these 3. Even if there are other tables, you always ignore that and click OK. So when you do that, you'll see this at the middle here between content and name. You'll see these 2 arrows pointing outwards. Click on that arrow to expand, and you'll see all the fields of your data that you want. For example, if I don't want to bring in the index one like that, you can undo that and check what you don't want. If I don't want product ID or category, and check what you don't want there, then you click OK. When you click OK, your data automatically gets consolidated or merged or appended, and you can see from here. See, load more, and you can see Kenya, TZ, Uganda as the source data. Now I go back and close and load. That gives us the 2 freedoms of either using the append tool for multiple sheets and excel.current workbook for multiple sheets. But also the excel.current workbook also works fine if you are appending or if you are combining multiple workbooks in a folder. The keyword there is multiple workbooks in a folder. For Power Query to read, you can put that. The good thing with Power Query is if you update the source data. For example, we know our query is coming from TZ here. the sheet called TZ. Where is it? We come here. TZ. Yes, Tanzania here. So we know Tanzania here has how many records? It has 3142. Should I add a record at the bottom? Let's see what happens. I add a record on the source data here and have this order ID called this 999 like that. And then say this is in, of course, we are not in April, but I can add April 2024 just to make it a unique entry. Then I'm going to call this, this is 2024, of course. No, we can't add here. If you add, because this is coming from, okay, let's just refresh. Let me add this one for Uganda because that is what is active. There and say this order number. Let me 999 like this. So it was 2304, 2303. I've added a new row. Now in the query one, like this. Let's refresh this. And I look for the order 999. So I'll come here. I hope there are not multiple orders. 999. Or the main order. So the order that I added is this, and you saw that it's formatted as a number. So it adds there as a number. So whenever you update your Power Query source data, automatically the combined worksheets or the combined or appended sheet automatically updates as I've demonstrated. And so to a folder, if you have data in a folder and you have Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania in one folder and do the consolidation, should you add a new country, say Rwanda, with the same number of columns or typically the same headers, automatically your query is going to pick it up automatically. So that brings to the end my presentation on Power Query. I'm going to invite questions, Alfred, to give us closing remarks so that we are done by 10:30.
So much, David, for question. We'll take questions before we wrap up. I have shared the link to our YouTube channel where you'll find the recording for this session and other recorded sessions. As well, I have shared the link to our website that you are able to view different courses that we have on data analytics and the full course in Excel, where you'll be able to work with the Power Query, as I mentioned, model your data, and also do data presentation. Yes, Judy?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just the last bit on consolidation. In case we wanted to add Rwanda, just like you've said, so we'll make Rwanda a table just like the rest, then go through the whole process of consolidation. So we'll find it in the list.
Yes. If you're using this method of Excel.current workbook, you will bring in Rwanda, convert it to a table. Of course, you'll have to load it to Power Query. Then from Power Query, oh, actually, no, sorry. You just bring it on the workbook, convert it to a table, then you refresh.
Okay.
Yes.
And a consolidation comes as a new sheet called a query. That's
Yes.
what oh yeah.
And of course, you can always rename this and call it whatever. So that name that comes with the sheet is what is displayed at the end here. You can see this, and you can call it whatever name that you want. Only that is a consolidation. But once the sheet is created, it will not go back and rename. You'll have to rename it manually. What is only renamed is the query name.
The query name.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Keep the questions coming.
Hi, I wanted to find out what common errors there are when loading from Power Query back to Excel. Sometimes I see those errors, but I don't know where to start with them or what they are.
Okay. The most common errors are errors on missing data. Sometimes you load a query and you see Kenya here in bracket 200 errors. Have you seen that before?
Yes.
So, for example, if you have in your query, for example, I have some errors. For example, let me just pick Kenya. Let me pick this here that I'm sure of, and I'm going to pick same day. I'm going to only say give me same day, and then same day here. I delete that. Then I'm like that. So whenever, let me just first come. Same day is how many? Same day is 543. Then I delete that. So for you to do away with those errors, press like this. If you get those errors showing up when you are in your query, the first thing to do is to replace those. You must replace the blanks, and usually happens if it's on the last column. So when I come to Kenya here, and I'm not saying this one doesn't have errors, but when you load your data, you'll experience those errors where you have that I remove that.
This is where we have date, David.
Yeah. Yes.
Where we have date, put a blank date or not.
On the date.
Yes.
Okay. The date. So let me just close this and prepare that. So let's let me have it refresh. So the first thing is when you get errors, the golden rule is always let me just pick this, copy this to a new sheet. And then I want to remove this, remove the formatting. So I have it like that. So when for example, I remove, we just remove some dates here. I go down like this, and then remove some dates there. Now, go to data, I get data to Power Query. And remember, those of you learning Power Query, the same Power Query that we use in Excel is exactly the same one that we use in Power BI. So realize that you have, we have null here. You see this? You have null, and I have some null at the bottom. Let's call this paste that. Then I close this and load. I don't know if this will bring us errors.
I wanted you to put something like not applicable on the date.
On the date here. Okay,
or not
let's
available, yes.
Something like that. So here, I put this like
Yes. Yeah. Now
like this.
refresh. Mm.
This like that. And then undo. Make sure that. Okay. So I go back to this data and refresh this. Yeah. So exactly, this is what happens. So when you see these 26 errors, it means they are the blanks. Who was that who was asking Judy?
That's one boy.
Boy, okay. So when you see these errors, it's from these blanks. So to cure that, either you're going to put a dummy variable here, I mean like a dummy entry, or replace with something. What would be the best, Alfred, to replace with? Say I go back to the
Replace with
query.
the dash. If
I replace with the
it is-
dash. Okay.
Yes. If it is NA, then it means it's not available or the date was
Yeah.
not given.
Was it recorded?
Yes.
Okay.
So we replace it with a null.
If so, for this error here, if so I'll go to replace error. So transform, then find replace is at home tab, replace values. So there's what says remove error. For example, if say I don't want, because this is going to mess up with my analysis, why don't I say I remove I remove columns, but say remove errors? Though that is going to mess up the number of records that I have. You could now
Replace.
see replace.
Replace
So
errors.
replace error. So replace.
If you go to David, if you go to transform, you'll get an option of replacing errors.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. So
Above field.
Replace values, yes, here. Replace errors. That is what I was looking for. So thanks for that. So I replace it with a dash, correct? Or a zero. Remember, a dash doesn't work here. Replace
Null.
null. Okay. The small,
And small.
yeah, null like this. Thanks. Then okay. Okay, like that. Now after that, of course, maybe you'd want to replace now the null. Find null and replace with something else. Replace values. Because it to me, I wouldn't leave it like that. I'll say anything that up, then I put a date. So when you're grouping your data, you could put a date that is not existent. So 1 to 1, 2099, like that. You see, that way I know this is the missing one. When I group it later, I'm going to group anything that happens in 2099 in the same place. I hope I have answered that question.
Boy, is that fine?
Another question? Of course, we'll continue answering the questions. You have our email address, you have our contacts. You can always reach us out. On the website, you've seen info@opencastlabs.co.ke, where you can reach us for your questions, follow-ups, or if you want training for yourself or your team, then you're available to do that. Now that we have your email address, we'll share future. We have webinars every month. Random Saturdays, not very consistent, but at least every month we'll have a webinar. So Alfred,
Yes. If there are no other questions, I think we can end there. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to have this recording.
Thank you.
Everyone, thanks for coming. Now the webinar will be ended shortly.